Today I am isolating while I wait for some test results, so I thought this is probably as good a time as any to make that Mr. Bean Media tier list that nobody asked for. So what I've essentially done is I've summarized every piece of Mr. Bean Media from 1990 to the present day, and I will be ranking them in terms of how important I think they are in the Mr. Bean canon. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean I'm ranking them in terms of quality. Sometimes the higher ranks will be higher in quality, in my opinion, but not always. It's more how core I think they are to the whole experience. So the first category, the highest category, is essential media. This is what you need to watch. This is the core Mr. Bean experience. And so based on that criteria, the sole piece of media that goes in this spot is the Mr. Bean TV series from 1990 to 1995, the 15 episodes that make up the basis of this character. That's the most important thing to watch. Now, some people of a younger generation would probably associate Mr. Bean first with the animated series, the cartoon version of Mr. Bean. So for them, that would probably be the core Mr. Bean experience. But none of those kids, as far as I'm aware, are making a tier list of this detail and quality. So, tough titties to them. Now, coming in second is the supporting media category. You could probably call this further reading, if you like. This is something that strongly supports the canon established in the higher category. So, for that, we've got the two Mr. Bean live-action movies. We've got Bean 97, or Bean the Ultimate Disaster Movie. And then we've also got 2007's Mr. Bean's Holiday. I was almost tempted to put those in essential media as well, but I realised, seeing as the TV show is how the character sort of started, I think let's put that at the very, very top there. But the two live-action movies are very, very important to the franchise. Again, this is not a rank of quality. I actually think Mr. Bean's Holiday is not a great film, but there's no doubt that it is an important piece of the Mr. Bean media pie. Now, along with those two live-action movies, I am putting in the in-universe books of the Mr. Bean franchise. Now, what do I mean by in-universe books? These are books that are available to us, but are ostensibly written from the perspective of Mr. Bean. So the three examples I've got there are the Mr. Bean Diary. It's not just a blank diary, it's filled with Mr. Bean's writing. The Mr. Bean Scrapbook, which was released in promotion of the first movie, so it's sort of his scrapbook of going to America, as he does in that movie, again, written from his perspective. And the similar thing for the second live-action movie, Mr. Bean's Guide to France. It's not a behind-the-scenes look at the character, it's in the character's world. Mr. Bean has written this scrapbook, whatever it is. On top of that, you do get a lot of things that reinforce and actually extend a lot of the stuff that's mentioned in both the movies and the live-action TV series. You get a lot of references to Mr. Bean's landlady and his girlfriend, all of which feature in the live-action series, and actually lots of aspects of the diary actually engage with clips and segments seen in the live-action TV series. So I consider that supporting media as well. On top of that, I've put the Mr. Bean Red Nose Day sketches in the supporting media. There's, I think, a half a dozen, maybe 5 Mr. Bean Red Nose Day sketches through the 90s and 2000s. And again, none of this contradicts anything established in the accepted canon. The only hiccup is in the 1995 sketch Torville and Bean, which features Mr. Bean's girlfriend, who is played by a different actress than the one that played Irma Gobb, his standard girlfriend in the live-action TV series. That could either be meant to be the same character, just played by a different actress, or it could be Mr. Bean's got a new girlfriend, in which case, good for him, he gets around. Happy for him. Now, curiously, I did just recently discover that there are 2 Mr. Bean short films released in the early 1990s by 20th Century Fox, and these are essentially reshot shorts based on previous skits from the first 2 episodes of the TV series. Mr. Bean takes an exam and Mr. Bean goes to a premiere. And I don't know what the purpose for these were. I know they were released on VHS as sort of a preceding the main movie. I don't know if this was like a attempt to get American audiences interested in this character, who was only shown on British TV at the time. But regardless, I haven't included that in the list for the simple reason it remakes previous sketches. For a similar reason, I haven't included any novelizations of Mr. Bean's adventures, either live action or animated. So then we move on to additional media. I guess the best way to describe that is you don't need to read that. You can, and it won't contradict anything in the upper echelons of the tier list, but you're fine sort of skipping that. Again, this is my opinion. So for example, I've included in there the Mr. Bean animated series. Again, for a lot of younger people, that will be the core Mr. Bean experience, not mine. Having said that, it is consistent with the previous echelons. You've still got Bean's girlfriend, you've still got Teddy, you've still got the Mini, you've still got his house, you've still got his landlord, Mrs. Wicket, who I believe is actually first mentioned in the Mr. Bean diary, and is then sort of reiterated into the Mr. Bean animated series. So it's all consistent, it's all fine. I'm happy to count that as part of the canon, but it is quite noticeably directed solely at a younger audience, whereas I would argue the original TV series was meant to be enjoyed by adults and children alike. So for that reason, I'm saying, yeah, you can count that. I don't think you need to count it though. And similar to that, the Mr. Bean animated series diary, essentially the same thing from what I've seen to the diary based on the live action series. I don't actually have this one, but I think it's exactly the same thing, very much the same format, written in the same distinctive handwriting of Mr. Bean. So yeah, it checks out, but again, because it's based on the animated series rather than the live action series, you can, in my opinion, gloss over that. Also in additional media, I'm putting the 2007 short sketch of Mr. Bean that was featured on the talk show Dame Edna's Treatment. I think that's what the chat show was called. It didn't last very long, and yeah, I can't imagine why that was. Now, I chose to put this in additional media because it distinguished itself from a piece of media that will appear on the next echelon down, because it is self-contained. It is foreseeable that this is Mr. Bean acting in his own universe again. And again, we'll get to that distinction in a little bit. You don't need to watch it because it's not very funny, but it doesn't break any continuity. I'm fine with it. I'm sticking it there. So then you get to this fourth echelon. Now this is non-canonical media, and this is sort of the one I struggled with the most. What I essentially mean when I say non-canonical media, it is set in a different universe. Most ostensibly, it is set in our universe. So when the character is engaging with things that exist in our universe, it's no longer separate and no longer just confined to this fictional realm on the screen. It's bleeding into our world. And because of that, you have to make a break and say, okay, this is now a different continuity. This is, if you like, our continuity rather than a distinct fictional continuity. For things like that, we've got Mr. Bean's music video appearances. Now, there are a few. I've got them there. He was in a comic relief video for Hale and Pace, the British comedic duo, in their song The Stonk. He appears in that. He also appeared in the music videos for the title songs of both of his live-action movies. Matt Willis's Crash in 2007, and what was the other one? And Boyzone Picture of You in 1997 to promote Being the Ultimate Disaster Movie. He appears in those videos. It's still him, but again, this is interacting with a real band that exists in our world, so we have to say that's non-canonical. Now, the one exception I made, and fretted over this, was Mr. Bean's 1992 comic relief charity single, Elected, featuring Bruce Dickinson and smear campaign. It's sort of a charity single by Bruce Dickinson and his band Smear Campaign, and the music video is about Mr. Bean trying to get elected. What I've decided is that the segments that feature Mr. Bean with Bruce Dickinson, a singer that exists in our world, they're non-canonical. However, the vignettes of Mr. Bean trying to become a local member of parliament, they are self-contained enough that I am happy to say they exist in the Mr. Bean universe. And that's totally could be the plot of something that happens. Hey, if he destroys a world-famous painting in the live-action movie and we consider that supporting media, there's no reason why we can't imagine him trying to get elected, as the song says. So I've split that video appearance. The parts of him in studio with Bruce Dickinson, they're non-canonical media. The parts of him actively trying to get elected, they are promoted to additional media. Other pieces of non-canonical media. Mr. Bean's commercial appearances. There's plenty over the years. When you see Mr. Bean engaging with the M&Ms, the delicious chocolate candy, you have to sort of say, okay, that's not really... We don't assume that M&Ms exist in Mr. Bean's world and are sentient creatures. So I'm going to say, again, non-canonical media with all of his commercial appearances. I would similarly put his live appearances on TV or in person in non-canonical media. So when he goes on talk shows or something, for example, and is engaging with a celebrity that we recognize and know, we have to say that's non-canonical media. The distinction is with the Dame Edna treatment, which I put here because you don't actually see him engage with Dame Edna, so it's self-contained. It could be in its own universe. Similarly, Rowan Atkinson appearing as Mr. Bean for promotion of whatever, visiting the Collingwood Football Club in promotion of a movie, or going, as I said, going on a talk show, riding his Mini to promote something, whatever. They're all non-canonical appearances. I've also put the video of Mr. Bean accepting his diamond play button for however many subscribers from YouTube on there as well, because that happened in our world. This is sort of tricky, but there are some VHS trailers featuring Mr. Bean in character promoting his VHS. Now, I have to say that's a different world to the one that's occurring in the content of those tapes. You can't be both in front of the camera and behind the camera, is the best way I can sort of describe it. So that's non-canonical media as well as just the ephemeral sort of work on the VHS tapes as well. For example, this one here, this does have Mr. Bean's handwriting, his distinctive handwriting, as supported by the books in supporting media, sort of describing what happens in the VHS tapes in the episodes from his own perspective. So we have to say, even though that is him doing it, it's a different universe. It's our universe again. Finally, in non-canonical media, I put non-fiction books. The only one I can think of is Mr. Bean, the script book, which is, as it says, sort of the script and a behind-the-scenes look at the making of the first live-action film. Not written from the perspective of Mr. Bean, in stark contrast to the Mr. Bean scrapbook. This is supporting media, this is non-canonical media. Which isn't to say it's not interesting. It's actually very interesting to hear how that movie came about. But, again, this is written with the understanding that Mr. Bean is a fictional character. This assumes that he is real and writing this book. I don't know if there are any other such examples of non-fiction books specifically related to Mr. Bean, but if there are, that's where they'd go as well. Finally, we move on to no canon media. So this is where there is no context provided. It's not that it's happening in Mr. Bean's world, it's not that it's happening in our world, it's not happening in any world. So the examples I've got are the recent YouTube series Handy Bean. Now this is on the official Mr. Bean YouTube channel, and it is essentially a pair of hands doing things, doing magic tricks, making something with arts and crafts, cooking something. And it's meant to be Mr. Bean doing it, but there's no wider context to that. It is, if you like, simply an image of the character. Similarly, on that YouTube channel, there are lots and lots of examples of reused Mr. Bean assets that seem to have been shot specifically for the YouTube channel, but they're used over and over and over again. Some of these live action, some of these are animated. Again, it's just a snapshot. It's a JPEG. It's a GIF. It is new material, but there is no wider context provided. So additional Mr. Bean assets and reused Mr. Bean material, that's no canon media. And the best way to think of that is just Mr. Bean merch. That's exactly what it is. It's just an image. We don't think that these things that you can buy featuring Mr. Bean's face in them are really Mr. Bean. It's just an image of the character, not the character itself. And with that, I've completed my Mr. Bean media tier list. A sentence nobody else should ever have to say in their life. Hey guys, I was just editing that video and I realized I completely forgot to include all of Mr. Bean's various multimedia CD video game app appearances. I just completely forgot. So for clarity, what you can do is put them literally anywhere, or just forget about them because it doesn't matter and none of this actually matters. So yeah, I hope that helps.